Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. We recently did a video where we broke down 10 Star Wars characters that people really seem to hate. Today we want to switch off all that negativity and look at 10 characters that a lot of Star Wars fans like and why they like them. Of course, 10 isn't really nearly enough to cover everyone's favorite Star Wars character, but hey, that's what the comments are for, right? In a room full of space wizards, wet behind the ear moisture farmers, weird-looking aliens, and space rogues, Princess Leia dressed in white was a beacon of hope, not only for the galaxy, but for basically every lovelorn Star Wars fan on the planet. But what truly made the princess special was that she wasn't just some damsel in distress, she was also a cunning political figure, rebel fighter, and leader. Minus the whole metal bikini thing. And as important as Luke was to the organization, it was Leia who really kept the rebellion afloat, along with another strong female character, Mon Mothma. Star Wars as a franchise has always been pushing boundaries, like incest. And that's part of the reason why Princess Leia is not only a favorite among Star Wars fans, but also a pop culture icon. Now, Luke Skywalker probably should be on this list, but I'm a bit biased. I always thought of him as a bit too whiny. Besides, I think fans like Mark Hamill more than they actually like Luke. Although Expanded Universe Luke is pretty awesome. But Han Solo, on the other hand, is universally loved, and probably the reason why Kylo Ren is universally hated. What made Han Solo so great was his non-commitment to everything. He was a free man, free to do whatever he wanted, with no responsibilities. But he had just enough goodness to do the right thing every now and then, which meant he wasn't a complete scumbag. In many ways, Han Solo is the character in Star Wars that I've always aspired to be. Unfortunately, I'm probably more like his son, which kinda sucks. Nonetheless, Han Solo is a man's man, fast with a blaster, great with the ladies, and a hell of a pilot. And in an effort to squeeze more characters on this list, Chewbacca the Wookiee that owes Han Solo a life that should be mentioned as well. Chewie is probably one of the most likable Star Wars characters in the entire franchise. He probably has the highest favorability rating out of any character. Because only evil people don't like dogs, and that's basically what Chewie is. It's as if one day your dog becomes your best friend, learns how to walk straight up like a human being, and also carries around a giant crossbow that fires explosive bolts. What's there not to like? It was the hello heard across the galaxy that introduced us to the Noble Jedi Order. And yes, I say noble because before the prequels, everything was a lot more black and white when it came to the Force. There was no nuanced view of the Force that took into consideration how lost the Jedi Order had become and how much Emperor Palpatine's empire benefited the galaxy. And Old Man Kenobi was our only link to this mysterious way of life, and for many, he was the mentor figure we all wish we had in our lives. After all, while most of us wanted to be Han Solo, our lives probably was much closer reflected by Luke's own terrible existence as a moisture farmer. This meant, of course, we all hoped that someone like Obi-Wan Kenobi would one day come along and tell us that we were special and deserved to have a freaking lightsaber. And as the prequels came along, we got a unique chance to see the entire life journey of Obi-Wan on his path to becoming a Jedi Knight and developing true wisdom, something that was further fleshed out by the excellent Clone Wars cartoons. By seeing Obi-Wan Kenobi's entire character arc, we better understand who he was and also respect him even more for the sacrifices and choices he made. While I always like hating on the Jedi Order, Obi-Wan Kenobi has always remained above my scrutiny. He alone made it through his entire journey with flawless execution and taught us about the importance of high ground and avoiding death stick dealers. For those of us looking for a higher meaning in Star Wars, look no further than Yoda. While Obi-Wan Kenobi was wise in a more practical sense, Yoda was on some next level stuff. The guy was almost 1,000 years old after all. While Obi-Wan Kenobi was never really around long enough to teach Luke much, Yoda was the one who had the answers and further fleshed out what it meant to be a Jedi in Episode 5 and 6. Yoda was the last connection that Luke had to the Jedi Order of old, and during his time on Dagobah, he tried to absorb as much information as possible, so that he could go on to teach the next generation of Jedi. Yoda also taught us that the size of an individual mattered far less than their will and courage. He also suffered some serious head trauma back in the day, which is why he speaks in such a weird cadence, but that never really stopped him from becoming the galaxy's most badass Jedi. Palpatine was an evil bastard, and during the original trilogy, he started developing a following, especially amongst those who liked certain aspects of his political platform. But it was during the prequel series, thanks to a legendary performance by Ian McDiarmid, that Palpatine really solidified himself as a fan favorite. Dripping with sarcasm, Palpatine was a troll before trolling was cool. The fans, of course, knew who he was, and we delighted in the fact that he was just playing games with the entire Republic for most of the trilogy. Now, just being evil and cruel does not make you an appealing character. Palpatine was cunning, and he did everything with a terrific smile on his face, and after seeing just what a mess the Jedi Order and Republic had become, there were many who began believing that Palpatine's Empire was a better alternative. Like Han had Chewie, Palpatine had Vader on a leash most of the time. And that's exactly who Vader was, one of the most fearsome attack dogs in the universe. Sure, he showed a bit of character depth near the end, but in a way, Hayden Christensen's wooden portrayal of him in the prequels was spot on. Vader was a stone-cold killer, but unfortunately we never really got to see the full extent of how badass he could be in the original trilogy. Luckily, we had that one scene in Rogue One that finally did him a bit of justice. And yes, that's how you make a grown man poop his pants without even touching him. Do we love Mace Windu, or do we love Samuel L. Jackson? When Tupac finally went back home, the role of Windu, which was originally his, went to Samuel Jackson. He brought to the character a certain type of quiet anger and fire that made Mace Windu one of the most feared and respected Jedi. Known for his skill as a duelist and his awesome purple lightsaber, he belonged to the old guard of the Jedi. But compared to Jedi like Ki-Adi-Mundi, who was a potato, and Jocasta Nu, who was a librarian, and of course Coleman Trebor, who was a stupid dinosaur, Mace Windu was just better. As a matter of fact, Mace Windu, with his mastery of the 7th form of lightsaber combat, was probably one of the best duelists in the Order. Considering just how bad some of the dialogue in the prequel series was, it comes to no surprise that one of the most liked and badass characters on the dark side of the Force had very few lines. Darth Maul served as the primary bad guy in Phantom Menace and fit the title of the film very well. He was an assassin who used the acrobatic lightsaber Form 7 and introduced the dual-bladed lightsaber to the big screen. He changed and pushed the boundary of what a Sith Lord could be. Although less powerful than Palpatine and Anakin, he at least visually seemed more dangerous. He was such a popular character that they stitched him back together and brought him back to life in the Clone Wars, where he was voiced by the excellent Sam Witwer. Maul would go on one of the most epic revenge tales in Star Wars history in pursuit of the man who cut him down, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I was a prequel kid, and in my preteens when Attack of the Clones came out. While it was panned as one of the worst Star Wars films ever, until the sequel trilogy, I actually really enjoyed it. Primarily for one reason. The Clone Troopers were probably one of the coolest sci-fi armies I had ever seen. I don't know if it was the aesthetics or the fact that they were clones, but the Clone Troopers sold me on Star Wars. I'd seen the original trilogy at a much younger age, and it had made an impression on me. But seeing the Battle of Geonosis unfold across the screen was freaking awesome. And yeah, I was a boy, and as a boy, I loved war, tanks, guns, and giant space battles. This was back in the day before Lucasfilm executives were trying to find themselves, and were completely comfortable with the fact that their target demographic was probably 90% nerdy men. And it was kind of a golden age for Star Wars, and a great time to be a kid. You had awesome novel series, video games, and of course the Clone Wars cartoons. First one was made by the Samurai Jack dude, and then there was Dave Filoni's Clone Wars series. Admittedly, the first season kind of was slow and terrible, but the second season really started to pick things up, and by the third season, they had some really good stuff going on. And better yet, all of this content didn't really just follow Anakin or the Jedi. Instead, a lot of the focus was on the clones, because that's what the fans wanted. Luke and Han were friends, but never really buddies. Chewie and Han were buddies, but Chewie's more of a dog. Han and Lando were buddies, but they had some serious issues in Empire Strikes Back. But with the arrival of Force Awakens, Star Wars fans got something that they didn't even really know they wanted. With Finn and Poe, we saw two unlikely individuals become the best friends almost immediately. Poe inherited the roguish charm we used to love in Han, while Finn finally humanized stormtroopers and was immediately likable through his imperfection and complete confusion. Their escape from the First Order and then reunion later at the Resistance base was one of the most endearing and natural sequences in the film. It also helps that Oscar Isaac and John Boyega are terrific actors. Alright, now we're at number 10. Now, I know there are a lot of characters I probably won't be able to cover, but for me personally, Chirrut Îmwe and Baze Malbus were the coolest characters in Rogue One. On one side, you had an acrobatic blind monk with a wooden stick, and on the other side, you had a gruff, heavy weapons expert. Chirrut Îmwe believed strongly in the Force, and Baze could care less. The two Guardians couldn't be any more different from each other, and that's what made their bond so awesome. Shrewd also showed fans that one didn't need to be Force sensitive to necessarily have it still guide you in your own life, which is definitely an interesting view of the Force. Well, there you have it, guys. Those are the reasons why these Star Wars characters are so beloved. I'd love to hear in the comment section below which other characters you think I should have included in this list. Also, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.